Baseboards, disaster. What went wrong? Hi, welcome back to Halton Warren 009. I'm Mark. As you can see, we're outside today, specifically outside the railway shed. What have I been doing for the last 3 months? Last time I did a video was back in January. The main reason I've had to wait is I have to wait for the nice weather so I can come out here and have the space to do some work. I have been busy though over the last 3 months. I've been looking more into the DCC side of things. I've bought bits and pieces and I'll show you those in a moment. One of the other things I've done is I've got to go down to the London Festival of Model Railwaying. I do like going to model railway shows. I do find some very interesting and very well done layouts, and it's just getting ideas and seeing how other people have achieved stuff, and it gives you something to aim for as well. The standards are so high on some of them. While I was down there though, I have been thinking about getting myself a totem sign. Now, my railway is not British Railways, it's not a main line, it's not standard gauge, but I do like those signs. So I bought myself one, and here it is. It's got 009 at the top. Unfortunately it says 009, but the bloke had already done it, so but it's fair enough. It doesn't really notice. Most people wouldn't know. Halton Warren, the name of the layout, is State Railway. It's State Railway because it operates on a private estate somewhere in the south, southeast, southwest of England. It operates to move stuff from the quarries, moves cattle and sheep around, and has a passenger service with it as well. So it's an estate rail, it's not a mainline railway. So yeah, BR sign, but who cares, my railway. Right, the other thing I've been doing, as I say, I can't work out inside the kitchen. I don't have another big workshop area. This shed's fairly small. It's only a 2-foot gap between the baseboards, which are U-shaped, which you've seen in the previous video. So I have to wait for the nice weather. And a few weeks ago there was some nice weather, so I thought, get out there, get the baseboard built, and that's what I did. Disaster, and I'll show you why. So if you can see me over the top of this, what went wrong? We've got 3 parts. Now, the baseboard, this baseboard for the fiddle yard, and the baseboards for the main layout I've done with a 3mm ply top. Why did I use 3mm? Years and years ago, like a lot of people, my dad made me a model railway. He made a 2B1 frame out of softwood, pine, and then he put a hardboard 3mm thick plywood top on it. Now, why did he do that? It wasn't plywood, it was hardboard. But back in the 60s, a lot of people had older houses. A lot of the older houses, the interior doors were panelled. And then 60s, people wanted to modernise their houses so they could go out and buy a hardboard board that was already cut to the door size, so they just nailed it on, painted over, and it supposedly modernised the doors, got rid of the panelling. So my dad made a model railway using a 3mm top, so I built a model railway using the 3mm top. Since watching YouTube channels, I've realised that most people go for a thicker top, so yeah, we'll get rid of this. And a couple of weeks later there was some more nice weather, so we've rebuilt the baseboard. This time we've gone for a 2.5 inch deep softwood frame. It's a lot more sturdy. We've got a 12mm ply top on it, and then we've got the cork. Now, what I didn't tell you was what the problem was the original baseboard and why it fell apart and ended up in 3 pieces. I got the 3mm ply, put it on top, nailed and screwed it down, fine. Then I wanted to put the cork on it, 3mm cork, put PVA glue down, glued it, had some sheets of 12mm ply, which was 4 foot by 2 foot, put those on, put lots of weight on top, went away, let it dry. When I came back the following morning, it had dried. The thing is, it all stuck together. The PVA glue was probably a poor poor product and too dilute. I put too much on, and the cork was probably more porous than I realised. So overnight, and I stored it in the summer house, and I think the damp got to it as well. So the whole thing kept moist for too long. There was too much glue which permeated through the cork, stuck to the boards I put on top, and that was it. The whole thing was just one lump when I came out. So anyway, I tried to ease it apart, and this was the result. I just pulled the whole thing apart. Hence, throwing that, discarding that, and I can use the wood elsewhere. But I've made this board now, it's a lot thicker. And the other problem I had is that the point motors I'd already used on the boards in here, and I was looking at reusing them. But I've put them on, they were seat points, and I've cut them down so they only go through 3mm ply, but we'll get onto that on the second. So, I've got the boards. Why haven't I got on any further than that? There has been the weather to get out here. This is going to be the fiddle yard board. It's a lot heavier than I wanted. I've got to kind of twist it and get it into place. But at least it's done. It's not going to move. I'm a lot happier with it. Track lane's the next thing. And that's the next problem I've had. For some reason there seems to be a shortage of the Pico left-handed 12-inch radius points. Right-hand ones, no problem. Left-hand ones I've struggled to get. I've managed to get two. The other two are on back order, but they seem to be back in stock now. Quite a few shops seem to have them, but I have struggled to get them. But as soon as I get those other two, then I can get the points on here and the rest of the track on here. As I say, this is going to be the fiddle yard. The track's going to come off here from the Helix and then loop into 5 loops. So there's 4 sets of points on each side. Then it's going to come back onto a reversing loop and back out onto the Helix. So here I've got to put something to change the polarity. And as I say, once I get the points, I can get all this laid down and get it fitted in. So that's where I am with that. What else have I been doing? For that, we need to pop inside, so I'll show you in a moment. Okay, the original plan was that the railway was going to be end-to-end. As you know by now, on the main boards I am now going to have a fiddle yard. So the trains can go down there. It's a loop, so they can go down, store up, the next train comes out, runs around the loop, comes up onto the main layout. It either goes into the station or it can run down the branch line at the side of the river here, and it would have either ended up in the quarry, which is the small baseboard at the back. Then they're only propped in so you can see what I was doing. They're not going to get used now. Anyway, the one at the back, the engine was going to come in V-tippers. It was going to uncouple, move into the head shunt, run round, connect back up to the V-tippers, and then go back down to the fiddle yard at the other end of the railway. Or passenger trains, and this would have been single coach, would have come up again through the branch line up by the river into a station, which is the front board, which would be more of a halt. As I say, just an engine and a single coach. The engine would have coupled, run into the head shunt, run round, connected back up to the coach and off again, and the little siding at the front was just for goods. Now, I'm learning more and more through watching videos and through doing my own railway here that model railwaying is organic. You plan something and then you make a change somewhere, and that change either leads to a change somewhere else or a new idea somewhere else. So, what have I now got planned for here? Okay, I'm just going to stop you for a moment, save wiggling you around and trying to do some movements one-handed, and I'll come back to you in a second. Hi, I'm back. Right, as you can see, I've now made another small baseboard. I did this at the same time as the baseboard for the fiddle yard. Made sense, I had all the tools out and the wood and everything ready. The idea now is to have a reversing loop on here. You can see where I've sketched out a 12-inch radius circle. This is a guide just to get the track down. The plan now is for trains to come up the branch line. We'll have a point in here that will come round, so I've got to move this scenery, join up with this loop, About here it will disappear through the back seam, go around, and I'm not sure how far it come out, but I think I'll probably hide it just so it looks like another branch coming in from somewhere else, and then again it will go off and then join the main railway. To have a loop up here, or reversing loop up here, I think it'd just make it more enjoyable to actually see trains run round. It would have been nice to do a bit of shunting here. I've got plenty of room to do shunting in the yard and at the main station. So yeah, to have the trains being able to run around just seems that it's going to be a bit more enjoyable. They can get running and I can be doing some work on the scenery elsewhere on the layout. Now obviously here it's going to be a reversing loop. This time I'm just going to use a small gauge master, and I can't remember what the unit's number or anything is, but it's a small reversing device for this loop. I've kept it simple because to actually use another one of the DR5013s from Digikeijs, they're about £50–60 each, and it's just not worth it for having for such a simple loop. The only things that will be up here is there will be a another detection unit, because I'm obviously going to have some more blocks up here. And for point changing, I thought about putting a DR4018 up here, but again it seems a bit over the top. There's just one point, so what I'm going to look at is have infrared detectors on here and just put that straight into an IP Colbert point motor from DCC Concepts. I've got to have a play with that. I've seen a video on YouTube about somebody who's done something similar. I think it was the DCC guy, so I'm going to have another look at him, but I think that's pretty straightforward to do. So that's the plan for this section, and I'll see you again in a minute. Right, we're now down at the house in the conservatory at the dining table. I am allowed to use this occasionally as long as it's not messy jobs. But what I have done is I've been down to my local model railway shop, which is AGR in Leighton Buzzard. Spoke to Anthony, the owner, who is a nice bloke, and apart from that he's very useful, very informative, and so I'll ask him quite a few questions, especially about the points, and I'll get onto those in a moment. So in the previous video I said that Father Christmas had been very generous. What I'd forgotten was, with lockdown, my family and Father Christmas have been quite generous as well, and not being able to get out, I'd been putting the money to one side. So I had a fair bit of money kind of stashed ready for model railway use, and I've spent just about all of it. As you can see, I've spent quite a bit on the DCC components. There's probably about 800 quid's worth here, maybe £700 worth here. So this is an expensive hobby, if it can be anyway. When you think there's what, £700 worth here, I've got a stack of locos upstairs. When I say stack, I've got about 5 or 6, but say £150 each. That's another £900. All the track, the points, the point motors. We're talking about thousands of pounds worth of equipment, and it frightens me sometimes. As you've seen, my railway's in the shed, and to have that amount of money exposed is a little bit worrying at times. Most of it's bolted down, and I do bring the engines and the rolling stock down back into the house when it's not up in the shed. Right, so what have we got here? Okay, we'll start at this end. We've got the DR5000, which is the Digi Central, which is the command station. I haven't taken that upstairs yet to put onto the computer to program it. That's something I've got to do probably next. Talking about the computer, I have got a pretty old laptop which does let me down from time to time. It keeps switching itself off, and it sometimes comes back on, sometimes it's half an hour or so. I don't want something that unreliable trying to run the model railway. So I had a look round, and in the end I bought a renewed, I think they call it, PC from Amazon. It was 78 quid, I think. I've also bought a screen, 22-inch screen, because that will all be mounted up in the railway shed for when I get this lot installed. And I just want to be able to go up there, switch it on, and everything come on, and I can start running trains. I was dubious about buying renewed or second-hand stuff, but I've had a play with it. I've had it for a month or so now, and it all seems to be working, so I'm pleased. The screen was another 50 quid. So what's that, £120? I've got a large size screen and PC to run the system off. Back to this. After the control, the DigiCentral, what I also want to do is run automated trains. So I need a block system, and to detect in the block system, I've got 3 DR4088 LNs. 3 are on this board. 1 will be on the other board where the other loop's going to be at the west end of the railway. I've also want to do obviously point changing automatically, so I've got 3 DR4018s, and then the unit at the bottom is a DR5013, which is the Digiverse. Now, as I said, what happens on the fiddle yard is the trains come down, they split into different loops, and then they come back and go out the same way and on the same line that they started with. That means that I've got a difference in polarity, and I need to adjust that somehow. So that's what this unit's for. As I stated, on the other end of the railway, it's just a simple loop, and these are about 60 quid each, so I don't want to buy one of those just for a simple loop that end, and that's why I've gone with the Gauge Master up there. On here also, I've gone at the moment for the NCE, and I think it's a CP6, yeah, CP6. This is your short detection. If there's a short on the railway, the bulb will light up to show you where it is. Because it lights up, it's drawing current, and it won't affect the rest of the system. So hopefully that'll work. It's very basic, but it should be okay. Now, the way this works is that the power's coming out from the DR5000, comes into the NCE CP6, which is the detection for the short circuits. From there, it's got 6 outlets. I've only used 5. 2 of them at the moment go up to these 2 top detection units, and there's 2 because it's split into half. You've got 8 detection one side, 8 detection the other side. Now, I could have just done 1 for each block, but I thought if I split it this way, then I've got a more accurate idea of where that short circuit's going to be from. This one's slightly different. This unit here will be detecting trains in the loops, and I'm not sure if I wired this right, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. But what happens is, when it enters the loop, obviously the Digi reverse comes in, and that's going to change the polarity as the train comes into the loop, out of the loop, so that it's correct for running on the rest of this, the rest of the layout without shorting out. Now, if I just fed this direct from the 5000, I was wondering if I was going to get problems. I haven't got a track here. What I have got is my ruler, so I'll show you what my thoughts were. Okay, so the black common wire goes to this side of the track. The red wires, which are the detection wires, we've got little little breaks along here. So black, red, black, red, black, red, black, red. The red ones feed back to the detection unit. The black ones are the common that go off and join elsewhere. Now, my thought is, if this unit is switching the polarity from here, so the train comes in and it switches round, another train comes out and it switches round the other way. Now, with that polarity switching backwards and forwards, and this is a loop, will it affect the whole loop? If it does that mean that these red wires then become the common wires and the black wires become the feed wires to the detection? Which is no good, because they don't actually feed back to the detection unit, so the system won't see where the train is, and will it cause damage to the units. So what I've done is the wire that comes out of here should change, hopefully. I don't know if it does or it doesn't. Will change the polarity as well. I've got a feeling it might not do, but that's something I've got to play with. But I'm trying to get around this, still accepting the signal from the red wires so I know where the trains are. I'll let you know how I get on with that. What else is on here? Just a simple block, which the wires go back into. These are available from Amazon. Quite a few people are using them. You've got bridging sections down the side, so you don't have to keep doing little loops of wire. You can just put these in. They do come in a strip of 12. This has got 12 terminals, but they're fairly easy to snap, and so you can just use a 1, 3, 6, whatever configuration you want. I'm going to colour code these last two so they tie up with the wires. Getting back to the point change, the idea, what I've seen the way it's wired on the internet, is that the signal wires come out, or the wires come out from the unit, the Digi Central. They come up to the 4018s into the signal, then people loop it out the signal and onto the power. But I've also seen recommendations to keep those separate. So yes, the signal will feed back from the DR5000 Digi Central, but the power feeds through this block and it will have its own power supply. Keeping it separate, hopefully. I don't know what the reason is. People have obviously had problems with it, but so I'm going to follow that. I can't see this going to cause a problem because it's still providing power to the right point. So the other thing I need on here is just a power supply, as I say, for the points, and I think that's about it. So what we'll do is we'll shoot back up to the top of the garden, and I'll get on from there. No, I won't, because I've just remembered something. The other thing I bought when I was in AGR is the point motors. There's 12 in here. I've got to replace the point motors, as explained. The seep ones have all been trimmed off to 3mm, so they won't go through the new 12mm thick baseboards. So I need new point motors. The other problem I had up there is I originally started with peak motors, which I'm not sure if it's my fault or whether I left too much flux on them after soldering the points. But I got a green residue on the points up there, and also the solenoid that switches the blade backwards and forwards, it's stuck on a lot of them, and I don't think that was down to the flux getting into it. I think that was just pure damp getting into the system. So I changed those out and tried seat motors, which were a great improvement. I still had the same problem. They weren't actually sticking, but the solenoids were quite stiff at times. So I had a chat with Anthony. He suggested, and I'd already thought about the DCC Concepts Cobalt analog IP points, though I wasn't sure which ones I needed. Anthony put me right on there. The other thing he told me about was that he's used these and installed them on some people's outdoor layouts, and he's had no problems with damping them at all. So that ticks a box for me. He did say that the only problem is that if you only use the sticky pads and they are outside, the frost gets to them and sometimes they drop off, so you've got to make sure they're screwed in. But apart from that, it's fine. Right, now definitely back up to the shed. See you in a minute. Right, back at the top of the garden again. One thing I didn't mention down in the kitchen was with the DCC little units. What I've done is I've bought a melamine lined shelving unit. I wanted it to be quite clean, and just painting it I thought wouldn't be give me a clean enough note, and it didn't give me the look I wanted, so that's why I've got the shelf and put it down. Took a lot of measuring, marking out, which I did before I peeled off the foil wrapper. So I've left the board clean, very careful and precise with the drilling to get the screws in, and I'm quite pleased with the outcome. Now to install that underneath the railway, I did look at the drawer slides that most people seem to use, but while looking on Amazon I did find some that are designed for computer trays, component trays, which seem to fit my bill a bit better. I want to sling it down rather than sideways. So anyway, when I come to fit that, I'll show you and I'll give you the details of what I'm actually using. So again, the other day it was quite sunny out here. This is just after I'd done that big new baseboard. While I was outside, while I had the tools and while I had the good weather, I decided to start doing the components for the Helix. Once I got the baseboard cut, which I had done in B&Q, I had some nice straight 100mm wide strips, and they've come out really well. I've got a electric miter saw, so I've got some good angles on here. The problem was I didn't have enough of those strips that were cut at B&Q, so the boards I had here, the 6mm boards, 12mm ply boards I mentioned earlier, I cut those into 100mm strips as well. I haven't got a bench saw, so I've used the circular saw, and although I seem to, and hopefully kept to the lines as accurately as I could, you do get a little bit of wobbling. So when you put these in the mitre, the strips in the mitre saw, every little deviation throws you out. So when it came to cutting the mitres, although these should be 22.5 degrees, some of them aren't. So it doesn't go down as clean as I hoped. But the idea is there's 8 of these to a loop. I worked out initially on a circle, and it didn't work. The gradient was going to be too high, and there's 2 ways around that. One, you make your loop, your radius or diameter of your loops bigger, which I don't have the luxury of doing because my shed is too narrow. So the other way was to elongate the loops, which is where these come in. The calculations I did, and I'll walk you through the calculations later, were based on 6mm, using 6mm ply, which has meant that now I've used 12mm ply, those calculations are out. So instead of having a gradient of about 2.5 degrees, or percent rather, I've got about 3.1, 3.2, which is a bit more than I wanted, but hopefully my locos will still get round there pulling their trains. A couple of photographs of the kits I've put together. I'll show you the calculations in a moment. I would like to be able to get on with these today. What I'm going to do is drill holes on the end and put 3mm pegs in so that these can line up properly and firmly, and with a bit of glue they should hold in place, but I've got some little brackets to screw in as well. I wanted to do that today, but the missus is upstairs at the moment. She's not feeling too great, so I don't want to cause a lot of noise. So this is going to have to wait. Luckily, I think I mentioned earlier, this is Easter weekend, and if we get 3 or 4 days of good weather, at least one of those, hopefully, if I'm allowed and we're not dragged out somewhere, I'll be able to put these in the little jig I've built, drill them off, which is the noisy side, and then get it all together. 7 of these loops, which is going to be quite interesting. Then I've got studding to put through it to actually support it. I've got to get the wood though to make a frame for the bottom. I've got to bring that up from the floor level before the loops, the Helix loops start. Okay, so we're in the outdoor workshop. The missus is feeling better, so I can get on with some work now. So what's the setup? Here is the flat pack fiddle yard, 8 pieces per section, and each loop, there's 7 loops, which I reckon is about 54 pieces of wood. Might be wrong there. 4 holes in each bit. That's what, 216 holes, so I've got a bit to do. Now what I want to do is drill holes to that side and use some small dowels just to put them together so they line up properly, glue it all together to give it strength, and then we'll put some little brackets across as well. Now the reason I don't want to stick ply across the gaps is that I'm trying to keep the headroom down. The more you reduce the headroom, you've got to obviously have a bigger gap between each loop. More loops you have, the bigger gap it starts reducing your or starts increasing your gradient. So that's what I'm trying to get away from. So what I've done is rigged up myself a little set here. Basically this is solid into the workbench. I'll put a slot of wood there so I can put the piece I'm going to drill on the side there, bring it up to the level, and to ensure that we get the right holes in the right places every time, I've got this piece of, well, it's a tool, it's designed, it's got a V-slot, so you obviously put it onto pipes or something, and then it's so that you can drill holes dead straight. Now some people might have pillar drills or other bits of equipment, I don't, so I've had to reduce myself to this. I'll turn it around a bit more without dropping my drill. Okay, so what I've done is put a couple of bits of wood either side, glued and screwed them in place. This is pretty solid, but I put a screw in there to hold it in place. This is 12mm, so I need the holes dead centre. So what I've done is a couple of 3mm bits of plywood, put them on the edge, and there is a little marker line on the side, and that's bang in line with these, so I know that hole, the centre of the hole there, is 6mm. So all we can do is give it a try. I'm going to do a few pieces, see if they line up. If they do, then I'll carry on doing the rest of it. So first bit on, take it up to the top so it's level. As I said earlier, I cut a lot of this with circular saw, so the edges aren't quite as straight as I would like, which means the angles are out. And if I can do, well, I think what we'll do is we'll clamp that in place. A couple of clamps if they can reach that far. That gives me 2 hands on the drill, and hopefully I won't snap the drill bit. Going in 3.5. Okay, earlier I did say that I would run through the calculations that I've used to design my Helix. So here we go. What I need to do first of all is work out the loop height, and that is the distance between one level of the loop and the next loop level. So to do that I have to take in consideration the actual baseboard, the cork underlay, the track itself, which includes the sleeper and the rail, the height of a train, and also a bit of wiggle room, so if a train does derail I've got room just to lift it off and take it out. So I have used 12mm plywood for the baseboard, 4mm cork, the track comes to 4mm, my trains average out to 31-32mm high, and then I'm giving myself 10mm wiggle room at the top. So we've got 12, 16, 20, 51, 52, 61, 62. So I've rounded that up to 65mm. The next thing I need to know is how high my Helix has to be. So the Helix obviously runs between the two boards, the lower board and the upper board. In my case it's a fiddle yard and the scenic boards. Now, at the moment my scenic board is fixed in place because it has to line up with the other scenic boards of the railway. My lower board I've left floating because I need to adjust that later, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so the height I've gone for between the two boards is 18 inches. Now that might seem a lot, but my top board is on a 4-inch frame, and then that sits on a 2-inch high rail. So that then leaves me 12 inches to reach in to be able to recover engines or trains that have derailed, or to go in and clean the track or do any other maintenance work that's needed. So as I say, I've gone for 18 inches, that's 457.2mm, which I've called 460. Now obviously we have to work out how many loops we need to get the train from the lower baseboard to the top baseboard. And that is simply dividing the height of the Helix by the height of each loop that I did on the previous sheet. So it's 460 divided by 65, and that equals 7.07 loops. Okay, so in my case that doesn't quite work out, and I'll show you why if I can separate these pieces of paper. It's always the way, isn't it, when you're trying to do something. There we go. Right, okay, my trains are going to come in the bottom here. They've got to go around this loop 7.07 times to get to the top of the Helix. So they come in and they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.07. And then when they reach the top of the Helix, they go on their way onto the scenic board. Now my issue is that my scenic board isn't this side, it's actually this side. So my trains have to come off the top of the Helix in this direction. So to achieve that, I've either got to add half a loop or take half a loop out. And this is what I was saying about keeping the lower board not secure, because I'm going to have to move it. The height of the Helix is 460 millimeters, but I've given it now an extra half loop. Now my calculations said that the height of a loop was 65 millimeters, so half of that is 32.5. So my Helix height now will be 460 millimeters plus the 32 millimeters is 492 millimeters. Right, so we worked out how big the Helix needs to be. How about the amount of track that needs to go on it? So my loops are going to be 305 millimeters in radius. So that is 12 inches. Now the reason I've gone for a 12-inch radius is that I could go bigger. I could go 15 or 18, but the bigger I make the radius, the more the Helix is going to stick out into the walkway between the two sides of my layout. So it's just going to stop me walking up and down. I could go smaller, I could go to 9 inches, but that is far too tight for one of my locos to get round. So that means it would never get down into the storage yards. So that's why I've gone for 305 millimeters or 12 inches. That is the optimum radius that I need to make my Helix work. So considering that, how much track do I need? Well, if we go back to my school days, a long time ago now, never was any good at maths anyway, but the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. So it's 2 times 3.14 times 305, which is the radius, gives me 1915 millimeters of track just to go round one loop. Okay, now obviously for the whole Helix it's got 7.5 loops, so I take the track for one loop, multiply it by the 7.5, gives me 14,362.5 millimeters of track. That's a lot of track. The track I'm using is Pico Streamline 009 Flexi Track, which comes in lengths of just under a meter. It's 900 and something millimeters. So that means I am looking at probably, what, 16, 17 lengths of track to do that. So anyway, we'll get onto that in a moment as well. Right, so what we've done is we've worked out how high the Helix is, we've worked out how high the loops are, we've worked out how much track we need. That will also be about the length of wood we need to go around obviously each loop as well to construct the Helix. So is that it? We know how big it is, we know how much track we need. Unfortunately not, because there's one thing we haven't considered, and that's the gradient. Now the gradient, we have to make sure, obviously if it's flat, the train won't have any problem at all going up it or along it. If it's too steep, we'll get either wheel slip or the train will slip backwards, but whichever way, the train just will not climb up the Helix. So we've got to make sure that our gradient is gentle enough for the trains to be able to successfully climb it, and that's what we'll check next. So the gradient equals the rise, which is the height of the Helix, divided by the length of track that's going to be on the Helix, so it's the rise over the run, and that's timed by 100 because that obviously gives us the percentage. So we said the height of the Helix was going to be 460 millimeters originally, plus the 32 millimeters for the additional half loop. The run we've just worked out at 14,362.5 millimeters. So the 492 divided by the 14,000 odd times 100 comes out at 3.43. Now I didn't know what the gradient should be, so I've looked online and looked at YouTube channels and different forums, and the consensus of opinion seems to be that it should be about 2. The 3.43 is 1.5 times that. So yes, too steep I think. So what we've got to do now is work out how much run of track we need to reduce the gradient from 3.43 to 2%. Now say about increasing the run, at the moment, and this is exaggerated obviously, our run is the short distance between the bottom of the hill and the top of the hill. What we've got to do is we've got to reduce that, smooth it out a bit, so that we've got a long length. We're achieving the same height, but we've got a longer length of track to reduce the gradient. Now to do that, we've got another little calculation to do. The percentage we require is 2%. Now to work that out, the track run required is the rise of the helix, how high we've got to climb, times 100 to get the percentage obviously, divided by the gradient that we require, which is 2%. So the track run, the height is 492 millimeters, which we know is the 460 plus the additional 32, times 100 divided by 2, which comes out at 24,600 millimeters of track. And that is a bit frightening, because that's now taken it from about 16, 17 lengths of track I need up to more like 27 lengths of track I need. And that is going to cost a fair bit of money. Anyway, that's the amount of track we need for the whole helix. The track we need just for one loop is obviously that divided by 7.5, which gives us 3,280 millimeters of track per loop. So how do we get there? Well, when we worked out the circumference of a circle, we came that we needed 1,915 millimeters of track for a loop. To achieve 2%, we need 3,280 millimeters of track per loop. So the difference is, obviously, we take the track that we actually need from the track we worked out, which gives us a difference of 1,365 millimeters. Now that's the track that goes right the way around the loop. That means that we've got to, or I have, in my case, increased my loops by 682 millimeters. I'll show you why I've got to do that now. So my original loops were circles, and they were 1915 millimeters. I have now got to get 3,280 millimeters. Now there's two ways of doing that. I can either increase the size of my circle, so I can get 3,280 rather than 1,915. The only problem with that is, as I say, my baseboards come through like this, and they're U-shaped, so that's going to encroach, and I haven't got the room between my two baseboards to get a bigger helix. So what I've got to do instead is take my circle and extend it long ways. And that, there and there, these are made up of 8 lengths, so the side lengths have got to increase by 682 on both sides, and then that will give me the 3,280 for each loop. Now I've got another problem there. Ooh, that bled through, didn't it? My lower board, my fiddle yard board, is here. The original helix was going to be in the side here to run on. The only thing is now, my baseboard fiddle yard is here. I've extended these loops, so they're now going to come in like this. How much is that going to encroach onto my baseboard? Now my baseboards, or that baseboard for the fiddle yard, it's going to come off the helix, go around in a loop, come back down and rejoin with the other storage loops there. So as long as this doesn't encroach any further than that, I should be okay. The only other thing I've got to do is, if that's coming in here, is to maintain a height between the board and the next loop. But that's for me to work out. The other thing that I could do is the loops. I've got to maintain them at 65 millimeters, but I could try just reducing the angle. So instead of coming up here, I'll reduce it down to there. Now that just means I've got to put more and more loops on it to get that extra amount of or to decrease the gradient. And the only problem there, have I got enough height to get that in? So I think I've got to go for this method, stretch it out like that, and just hope it doesn't intrude on that too much. I can luckily move my fiddle yard baseboard across a bit to give me a bit more room, but I'm going to have a play with this. I definitely need the fiddle yard in there, and I need a helix to get between the two. I've just got to work out how I'm just going to set it up, but I've got all the calculations now of what amounts and lengths and distances I need. I hope that makes sense, and we'll move on to something else. Well, what a day, hey. The missus is better, that's the best news. I was a bit worried about her earlier, but because she's better, I managed to get some work done with the drilling. I didn't want to disturb her while she was sleeping. What else? Right, baseboard. Buying PVA glue in bulk at a cheap price is definitely a no-no. As you've seen, I've redone the baseboard. It's a lot stronger than the other one, and I'm pleased with it. But at the end of the day, I've wasted time and I've wasted money. So buying that glue was not good. Other mistake is I only had one 3.5mm drill bit, which I said earlier I had to do everything slowly and carefully to ensure I didn't break it. I did. So I've had to send out and order some more drill bits. After saying don't buy cheap glue, I have bought cheap drill bits. I've bought a pack of 10 3.5mm drill bits for £4.95, I think it was. Now I could have bought one drill for that, which would have been a better quality, but I wanted to make sure I got those, can get those parts for the helix finished. So if I break one or two or three of them, it's fine. I'm going to have plenty of drill bits to actually finish it. If I spent £5 on one drill bit or more on one drill bit, there was the issue maybe that I could have snapped it. So that's done. The other thing that was probably a down is the DR5013 and its connection to the DR4088. The 4088 is the detection, so I know where the trains are on the loops. I was thinking along the lines that the 5013 was wired to it to ensure that if the polarity was being changed on the loop by the 5013, the 4088 would still pick up the signal coming back along the red wires to tell me where the trains were. I am certain now that I've got that wrong. Talking to a camera, videoing it, listening back to it is like bouncing the ideas off somebody else. I'm a bit of a loner. The only person I ever talked to about model railways is Anthony at the model railway shop. I'm not sure that there's a club around here. I don't know anybody else who's got a model railway. So for me, my interaction with people for model railway is Anthony at AGR and YouTube. So yeah, as I say, actually recording it, playing it back, listening to what I'm talking and my thought processes on the video is good. Positive sides, I know where I'm going to go. I am more focused now than I have been for months on where this railway is going to go. The last two videos helped with that. That was definitely getting my thought processes down. And now I know where I'm going to go. I know what I want to do. I'm pretty certain I know how to do it. The Helix is ready to go. That's the next video. I will put that together. And it's exciting times. All I need now is the time and the good weather to get up here and put everything together. Bit of an apology as well. While I've been recording today, it wasn't until again I was listening to some of the stuff later. There was a lot of noise in the background. You probably gathered I live in the countryside. The sheep are bleating at me now from just behind you. But when I was listening back to the previous shots for this video, the amount of bird song, cockerels crowing and the odd aircraft going over, I'm not that far away from Luton Airport, probably about 8-9 miles. So if that's interfered with the sound, I am sorry. I hope I was still clear, and it's something I've got to be aware of in future. Something I'm very aware of is the fact that I am a total novice to all this. I am learning as I go along. Any comments that I get from anybody who watches these videos, this is video number 7. I have got 3 subscribers at the moment. I haven't had any comments from any of them, so I don't know whether I'm doing a good job, a bad job, an indifferent job. It'd be nice to find out, but I will wait until I get a few more subscribers and hopefully they'll tell me. I'm going to wind it up there. Thank you for watching. Thank you to listening to me. I found it interesting, I found it enjoyable, and I've learnt a lot. Hopefully you've picked up something from it as well. So for now, happy modelling. See you next time. Bye.